Tonight, I bring you the worst news I've seen all week. It's January 21st, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
Facebook, the social network that literally 1 billion people in the world use regularly, has brought in an official censorship program that explicitly targets right-wing content. Ironically, they made this announcement in Germany. That's the thing about social justice warriors today. They are so historically illiterate. They miss the irony of announcing curbs to civil liberties while standing in Berlin, speaking in German. The weird thing is that the announcement this time is being made by Jews. Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook's chief operating officer, at the direct instruction of Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's chief executive. No flicker of discomfort from these liberal Jews banning political thoughts in Germany. Just clueless about history, eh? Here, some quick background. As I've told you before, back in December, in the aftermath of the massive Muslim terrorist attacks in Paris in November, and as young Muslim migrants were sweeping across Europe by the million and bringing Islamic rape culture with them, Mark Zuckerberg declared that the problem wasn't terrorism or Sharia culture, but people who criticize those things. Here, let me read the whole statement from him verbatim. He made this as a Facebook status post, of course. Here it is. He said, "I want to add my voice in support of Muslims in our community and around the world. After the Paris attacks and hate this week, I can only imagine the fear Muslims feel that they will be persecuted for the actions of others. As a Jew, my parents taught me that we must stand up against attacks on all communities. Even if an attack isn't against you today, in time, attacks on freedom for anyone will hurt everyone. If you're a Muslim in this community, as the leader of Facebook, I want you to know that you are always welcome here, and that we will fight to protect your rights and create a peaceful and safe environment for you. Having a child has given us so much hope, but the hate of some can make it easy to succumb to cynicism. We must not lose hope. As long as we stand together and see the world and the good in each other, we can build a better world for all people." That's Mark Zuckerberg. My first observation is how weird it is to remark so briefly on the terrorist attacks and then immediately, in the same sentence, say he was thinking about how afraid Muslims must be. 500 French infidels were just attacked by Muslims in the name of Islam, by something called the Islamic State, but Zuckerberg's first thoughts turned to the fear Muslims must have? That's odd. He invoked his Judaism for a reason I'm not quite sure, but then he started talking about attacks on, quote, all communities. Have there been a lot of attacks on Muslim communities? A lot of Christian or Jewish or Hindu terrorists attacking Muslims that I just haven't heard about? What bugs me the most, though, is that Zuckerberg used exactly the same word to describe what happened in Paris as what he imagines is happening to Muslims. He used the same word, attacks. So what happened to the 500 people shot in the Paris attacks was just an attack, and Muslims are being attacked for those attacks. He chose the same word. Think about that. It's like describing a bank robber and the policeman who chases him as both shooters, the same thing. But the money quote was his promise to create a peaceful and safe environment for you. Of course, Facebook is just the internet. It's in cyberspace. It's not a real place. So peaceful and safe doesn't refer to actual war or violence. It means political discomfort. Zuckerberg used pretty transparent code for, we're going to block words and images that would hurt your feelings, but only hurt Muslim feelings. That's who he was writing about. Now, that was December, but it's a month later, and it brings us to the Berlin announcement. There she is, Sheryl Sandberg, the billionaire chief operating officer of Facebook. She's in red, flanked by German government authorities and left-wing NGOs, announcing something called the Online Civil Courage Initiative and kicking in €1 million from Facebook. So what does this mean? Well, like I say, it was literally announced in German. which is classic. But throw it through the Google translator machine and you can follow it pretty easily enough. Online civil courage is a bit vague, but the headline of the press release adds the phrase, for use against online extremism. And in the first paragraph of the press release, it says, quote, combating extremism and hate speech on the internet. Okay. Now, when I think of online extremism, I think of how the Islamic State terrorists use social media so powerfully to recruit terrorists from the West, to communicate with each other secretly, and of course to promote their propaganda, which is not just the hard feelings of hate, but actually murdering people. But that's not what Facebook is talking about. That's actually the opposite of what they're talking about. As Zuckerberg signaled last month, the problem he cares about is not Muslim terrorist attacks. It's the, quote, attacks in response to terrorism. People having hard feelings in response. Okay, so what's Facebook going to do? What's this civil courage thing? Well, here's the next part of the press release. Quote, the initiative will bring together experts from the field of combating violent extremism to jointly develop best practice examples, which are then provided to NGOs, governments, and other online services available. In addition, tools are being developed by means of which people can get involved in the field of counter speech itself. Oh, okay, counter speech. I think I know what that means. It's sort of what we do here. We speak out against things. If someone says something bad, you counter it with something better, a debate, a clash of ideas, freedom. So fight falsehoods with truth. I get it. I'm not sure how Facebook or any central authority, especially one specifically including government officials, should or can get involved with, what or how people can or should say. But I'll play along because they did mention violent extremism, so maybe that's their code for terrorism? Or given that this announcement was in Germany, maybe they mean the mass swarming sexual assaults by Muslim migrants that Germany experienced on New Year's Eve? Maybe it's that. Okay, hold that thought for a moment, because then Sandberg is quoted in the German press release, and tell me if you can even make sense of this. Ready? Here's what she said, quote, hate speech has no place in our society, not even on the internet. Facebook is not a place for the dissemination of hate speech or incitement to violence. With this new initiative, we can better understand the challenges of extremist statements on the internet and better respond to it. Together, we can ensure that the voices of peace, of truth, and tolerance will be heard. The best cure for bad ideas are good ideas. The best remedy for hate is tolerance. Counter speech, capital letters, is incredibly strong, and it takes time, energy, and courage. Okay, well, hang on. Which is it? See, there are different philosophies there. Will bad ideas be countered with good ideas? Or will bad ideas just be censored? That's different. Is the best remedy for hate, is it to show tolerance? Well, does that include tolerance for bad ideas or people we disagree with? Didn't she just say she wouldn't tolerate hateful comments? There's no place for them on the internet? And where does the courage part come in? Well, Peter Newman, a professor, tried to handle the tough parts. He was quoted in the press release too. He said, quote, virtually all experts are agreed that to remove content at best represents a part of the solution to the problem of online extremism and hate speech. Oh, so it is about removing bad speech. Didn't Sandberg just say the best answer was to respond with courageous truth? But then Newman says this, quote, equally important are the support of counter speech, again, capital C, capital S, the promotion of grassroots movements that fight extremist views, unquote. Oh, okay, I think I'm starting to get it now. Ideas that Facebook doesn't like will be deleted, but that's only part of the solution. Facebook will promote ideas it does like. So by counter speech, capital C, capital S, they really mean a one-way conversation from Facebook to you. It doesn't sound like freedom or a debate. But I guess when it's a war and you're dealing with terrorists in the Islamic State, it's best not to accord them our Western luxuries of freedom. Didn't Facebook mention violence several times? Well, next up was Sasha Halvacek from another left-wing NGO. Here's what she said, quote, together we can find an appropriate response to the increasingly sophisticated online strategies of extremists. Our mission to initiate this forum is to support credible voices against hate in an informed and strategic manner and to encourage, because they represent the overwhelming majority of people. Okay, so again, encouraging and promoting ideas that Facebook likes, against extremists. Extremists, eh? This is who I think about when I think of extremists. Islamic State terrorists. Or maybe it's the mass sexual assault in Cologne, Germany. Or maybe it's the terrorists who attacked Charlie Hebdo in Paris, or a few months later shot up 500 people. Or maybe it's just these people on the street pushing Sharia law. That's what I think of when I think extremism in Europe. But no. See, that's my point. That is not the enemy in the eyes of Sandberg and Zuckerberg and the German government and these well-paid left-wing NGOs. The enemy, the extremists, the haters, the violent ones that they're talking about are precisely the opposite. I mean, didn't you listen to Zuckerberg's Facebook post? Here, they saved the worst for last in their official press release. Here's Annetta Kahane, another Jewish censor, letting out her inner fascist in German language in Berlin. She said, and I quote, "This is necessary because right-wing extremism, racism, and anti-Semitism are present in all walks of life in Germany," unquote. Oh, it's right-wing extremism? Right-wing racism, right-wing anti-Semitism. Is that a fact? Is that who's going around terrorizing everybody in Europe these days? Nazis, maybe. Really? Was it 1,000 white pride skinheads in Cologne, Germany, who did that mass sexual assault on New Year's Eve? What planet are you on if that is your reality? Well, she continued. Here's from the press release again. Sanctions against hate speech alone is not enough. It is more necessary than ever here to develop tools and strategies that can be a successful weapon against hate, the counter speech, again, capital C, capital S. So not only does she want censorship, she wants sanctions, presumably legal sanctions like prosecutions, against right-wingers, again, counter speech. That's the new code word for officially approved left-wing voices. Okay, last quote from her. She says, "Bring laws to advantage to operate a responsible company policy and to establish new forms of speech. Education and culture belong together." So Facebook, built on Western values of freedom of speech and freedom of association, but not anymore. Now it's about new ideas like responsible speech, new forms of speech, changing the entire culture to ideas that fit with their view, or as Google's executive chairman put it in the New York Times, spell checkers, but for hate and harassment. So as you're typing a crime thought, a crime think, Facebook will edit you, it will delete you, and maybe you'll find a lot more good think served up in your Facebook news feed. Very Orwellian, no more bad think, only good think. Are you worried about Muslim rape sprees in your city in Germany? If you try and type about it, Facebook will block you. But now you've identified yourself to Facebook, so you'll get the good think now. You'll get the counter speech countering you. Facebook knows more about you than any human being does. It probably knows more about you than you know because it doesn't forget anything. Facebook knows what you proactively tell it, but it also knows what you look at on the computer, what you search for, what you read. It has the biggest database about you in the world. And now it's teamed up with the German government to censor bad thoughts and promote good thoughts, counter thoughts. Not to censor the Islamic State, but to censor, you heard them, right-wing extremists, which they define as people who disagree with them. You know, in science fiction, Skynet, that's that sci-fi moment when the machines become self-aware and destroy humanity. It's from the movie The Terminator. Well, it's not machines against people. It's political elites using the power that the internet gives them over the little people. Those political elites, humans, deciding to remake the world in their image. Not through some explosive sci-fi war, but by changing what we can know about the world by censoring it, and what we can say back to the world by spell checking our ideas, which eventually spell checks our thoughts. That's far more scary to me than any blockbuster Hollywood has ever dreamed of. Stay with us for more.
think that the oil sands have been expanded too rapidly without a serious plan for environmental remediation in the first place. So that's why we don't think it's up to us to decide whether there should be another route for a pipeline. Because the real alternative is not an alternative route, it's an alternative economy.
You heard the man. He said the answer is not this pipeline or that pipeline. It's to get off pipelines altogether, to get an alternative economy. Who is that? That's Gerald Butts. Then he was the president of the World Wildlife Fund Canada, a radical environmentalist group funded by foreign donors. But now he's the principal advisor to Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister. I talk about this because just this morning, the mayor of Montreal, a longtime Liberal, Denis Coderre, announced that he and the city would oppose a major oil pipeline proposal called Energy East. What does this mean for Canada? Joining us now to talk about this is a man who is in a good position to comment, my friend Joe Oliver, former finance minister and energy minister. Great to see you again.
Great to be here.
Well, it's one thing, Joe, for an activist like Gerald Butts, and in fairness to him, that clip was in his earlier life as an anti-oil lobbyist. It's one thing for him to say that as a lobbyist. It's one thing for Trudeau to criticize pipelines from opposition. But now he's in government. And we've just had the Keystone XL pipeline scotched by Obama. And then in his mandate letter to his transport minister, Justin Trudeau ordered a moratorium on oil tankers off the West Coast, which in my opinion kills two more pipelines, the Northern Gateway pipeline and the Trans Mountain pipeline. There's only one pipeline left, this Energy East pipeline, and now Liberal Denis Coderre's against it. Joe, is the Liberal government actually going to shut down all pipelines in Canada?
Well, I certainly hope not. This would be a real concern because we have a fundamental strategic objective, and that is to diversify our markets for our oil and gas. We only have one market right now. It's the United States. They found vast amounts of shale gas and shale oil. They're going to need us less. We're producing more. We need other markets. Fortunately, those markets exist. The world is hungry for energy and will be for many decades to come. Fossil fuels will be used predominantly for many decades, according to the International Energy Agency. So we have to be realistic about that. But in order to take advantage of those markets, we have to bring our oil and gas to Tidewater, to put them on tankers and deliver them to the Asian and other markets that want them quite desperately. There's a tremendous strategic complementarity. We need to find new markets. They need to find alternative sources of supply. What's missing in all this is literally our ability to deliver. And if we block pipelines, there may be some way to bring some of the oil to the coast by train, which is environmentally less safe than by pipeline, but it's absolutely inadequate to do the job. And at stake here are tens of billions of dollars and tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs.
Well, sometimes I add up the cost of construction of these pipelines. I mean, with all the route changes, Energy East is now $15.7 billion. I'm told that with the 200 changes, the Northern Gateway pipeline is $10 billion. Kinder Morgan expansion, probably $10 billion. So we're talking $35 billion worth of construction, or as the Liberals would call it, infrastructure, all private sector money, all good to go. In the case of the BC pipelines, Aboriginal set-asides, Aboriginal equity. I just don't understand how, I mean, it's one thing when you're a critic, but now that he's in the seat of power, for Trudeau to turn his nose up at $35 billion, and that's just on the construction. That's not even what's going to flow through it. Do you think he's going to blink and say, well, maybe I got too far ahead of myself in opposition? Or it doesn't look like he's blinking to me, Joe.
Well, he hasn't yet, but let's hope he will. I mean, take Energy East as a specific one that's in the news today because of the mayor of Montreal's comments, his opposition to it. I mean, let's understand what we're talking about. This is bringing oil, Canadian oil, from northern Alberta to the east, to the refineries in Quebec City and St. John, New Brunswick. It'll create jobs. It'll save refining jobs. It'll result in lower cost fuel. in the east of Canada, and an opportunity to export the excess oil to Europe and to India. I mean, it's an enormous economic opportunity, and it would be very good for our country and for jobs. And right now, as you know, with the decline in the price of oil and the impact that low economic growth internationally is having on Canada, we're suffering from a lower growth rate in this country, and it's impacting on people's standard of living.
You know, this would be, in many ways, a good time to build those pipelines. While the economy's a little softer, labor's a little softer. Build the pipelines now. Oil's not going to stay at $28 a barrel forever. And the demand is there now anyways. I mean, there are places. I saw an announcement by Brad Wall, the Premier of Saskatchewan, the other day, of a $142 million new investment, largely in oil and gas, in Saskatchewan. So people are still putting money in. These companies that are pulling out of Alberta, they're not stopping making oil. I mean, the world still buys oil. They're going, let's talk about Alberta for a minute, because I don't think you've weighed in a lot on that, especially since some of the devastation has come since your term as finance minister has expired. We have Premier, and I'm shifting gears here for a bit away from pipelines, but it's part of the same problem, because I think the NDP in Alberta, same thing. They claim they're for pipelines to Tidewater, but if you ask them about any specific pipeline, they've got a reason to be against it. What's your observation, both as a former finance minister and a former energy minister, of Rachel Notley's tax hikes, carbon tax proposal, and we don't know the details of it yet, but she's coming out with an oil royalty review too. What would you say as a guy who used to have a foot in all those issues?
Well, the concern, of course, is that in a time of low economic growth and declining incomes, the last thing we need are more taxes on businesses and on individuals. We want to encourage businesses to invest, to create jobs. We want to keep taxes low for individuals to make life more affordable, and also to stimulate consumption. Now, there's another issue that you made some reference to, and that is, you know, there's a lot of talk on the part of the Liberal government about the need to stimulate the economy because growth is slow. But in order to do that, they're talking about increasing infrastructure spending, which will drive up deficits. And, you know, the issue of a $10 billion deficit, which is pretty big, is long past. We're talking now $20 billion, perhaps considerably more than that. The projects that we've been talking about, the project to create the infrastructure, the pipelines, would not result in deficits. This is private sector money. 100% of the money would come from the private sector, none of it from the public sector, and therefore it wouldn't add to the deficit at all.
The opposite. It would be a source of taxation.
Precisely. It would stimulate employment, it would stimulate economic growth, and it would create billions of dollars of tax revenue, which of course is what is needed at this moment in time.
I want to mention Energy East one more time, because I mean, the Keystone XL pipeline is dead. By the way, TransCanada has launched a NAFTA challenge. The Prime Minister hasn't supported that. I mean, Rachel Notley has not supported that. It's like they're grateful it was shut down. But Energy East is a little different, because you mentioned the importance of the refineries in St. John. It's interesting, I think, to a lot of Albertans to learn the biggest refinery in Canada is not in Alberta, it's in New Brunswick.
It's in New Brunswick. It's the Irving refinery in St. John.
And they want this. So New Brunswick wants this. All three main parties in the legislature in New Brunswick voted and supported. So this isn't a split out there. Do you think that the will of New Brunswickers, all three parties, whatever leverage the Premier out there has on his fellow Liberals in Ottawa, do you think that this will get the green light go, or do you think there's just too much political environmentalism is too entrenched in the media, in the popular culture, in politics? I mean, a $15.7 billion project, Joe, that's larger than any construction project in Canadian history measured in today's dollars.
Well, I would hope that it'll go ahead, and it's clearly in the interest of New Brunswick, and that's why there's political unanimity on it. It's in the interest of Alberta because it's an opportunity to export more of their oil, something which they want and need to do, even at these lower prices. But I also would argue it's in the interest of Quebec because it will feed Quebec refineries and it'll create jobs in Quebec. But we can't have a rule which says that every single project in Canada must serve the interest of every single province, because if we do that, we can't actually get anything done. I mean, the transcontinental railway, which was the signature achievement, or one of the signature achievements of Sir John A. Macdonald, of course, wouldn't have happened if unanimity was the criterion. Mm-hmm. There was a fair amount of opposition.
Every
to it.
little shakedown artist along the way could have put up a drawbridge.
But this was a national project, so a nation-building project, and frankly, I believe that building infrastructure to export our oil and gas are also nation-building projects.
Well, I mean, the Constitution answers that question. That's the matter of federal jurisdiction. I don't even understand why these mayors think that they can have a say in that pipeline any more than a say in whether or not our CF-18s go here or there. I got one last question. You've been very generous with your time, Joe. It's great to see you again, by the way. I want to ask you this. Justin Trudeau has an affection for communist China. We know that. He said it's his favorite country other than Canada. His father was similarly sympathetic. And he has signaled that he's going to have a warmer, more deferential approach to China. He's appointed very senior people on the China file to his inner circle. One of the things China is interested in, obviously, besides investing in Canadian oil companies, is getting that Canadian oil. They have an interest in Northern Gateway. They've expressed interest in buying oil and even in part ownership of it. Do you think that Justin Trudeau's affection for communist China, which I find a little bit disconcerting for moral reasons, do you think that might be something that blows open a path to Tidewater, that China's saying our essential condition for warmer relations is you build this Northern Gateway pipeline and you value China more than you value environmental radicals? I know that's in a way an unethical foreign dictatorship can get ethical oil to market. What do you think of that?
I don't think I'd actually, Ezra, go that far, but I do think that the Chinese may be starting to lose patience with Canada as a potential source of energy, because it takes so long to get anything done. And we've read that recently in the newspapers. One of the state-owned enterprises talked about the fact that, this complementarity, and I discussed that with the president of China, actually, and he acknowledged that complementarity, but it doesn't mean anything if we can't literally deliver. So I think the Prime Minister has to take into consideration Canada's national interest, and Canada's national interest is to export more of our oil outside the United States, where we're currently getting a huge discount and where the market is shrinking on us. We simply have to look elsewhere. China, of course, is the biggest market. It's in their interest, but it's first and foremost in our interest that we do that.
You remind me, when you talk about China, we're not the only people racing to fill China's energy needs. Vladimir Putin signed a $400 billion pipeline deal with China. Australia is in the shale business too. The United States is looking to export oil. It almost feels to me like the environmentalists saying, shut down Canada, boycott Canada, stop Canada's pipelines, stop the tankers. It's almost like they're playing interference for OPEC or for non-OPEC competitors. Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, I think that other countries, our competitors, are looking with some bemusement at the fact that here we are, a country with vast resources that aren't exploiting them. We're the only country in the world not taking advantage of, this enormous wealth that is God-given and we're sitting on, and for us not to would be a horrible crime. And frankly, I don't think Canadians, when they give due consideration to this, will permit that to happen. We're too smart a people to let that happen. Why should we be the only country in the world blessed with natural resources and not take advantage of them? And we can do it, by the way, in an environmentally responsible way. So we don't have to sell our soul to do it. We can do it in a responsible way, but we got to get on with it. And time can be running out because there are alternatives out there for the markets that are looking for supply.
Well, I sure hope you're right. That sounds optimistic. I hope Canadians understand what's at stake, but I'm worried that we've got a prime minister who's going to kill the goose that's been laying golden eggs. Joe Oliver, what a pleasure to have you back in studio.
Thanks so much,
my friend. Stay with us, folks. So much more after these short messages.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back to the show. Well, refugees are on our mind, not just the Muslim migrants streaming across Europe, but those that Canada has said they'll bring here by the tens of thousands, much more than we have the capacity to do, let alone to vet. Well, joining us now via Skype from Ottawa is our friend Brian Lilley to tell us more about it. Brian, what's the latest on this mad rush by the Liberals to jam 50,000 Muslim migrants into our country for no real reason other than they're trying to prove they can do it?
They're trying to make themselves feel good. This isn't about, on some level, yes, I'm sure it's about helping real bona fide refugees, but they're doing it in such a way, Ezra, that, whether you like them coming or not, they're not doing it in a way that is best for the refugees or for Canada. All right. So since November 4th, when the Liberals took power, we've had 12,400 people arrive in Canada through this system. Okay. It's slower than they said, but it's still faster than a lot of the agencies that are on the ground trying to deal with this can handle. And so far, in the last week, we've had Vancouver, Halifax, and Ottawa all say, you know what, this is too many, too fast, too furious. We need to pause. We need to slow down. In fact, I was at a briefing with officials on background, but Carl Nicholson, who's with the Catholic Centre for Immigration here in Ottawa, was there, and he spoke quickly about what the problem is. Essentially, more people than they can handle. Take a listen.
If you imagine a system where, you've got 400 rooms here or 400 places and it's full, then it's only responsible to say, I don't have any more space. So you need to do two things. You need to either create more space, either by renting more hotel rooms or moving people out. So that's why we said, we need to get some movement in one of those two places. Don't send us anymore until we do.
Now, Ezra, there are people that are in hotel rooms in Vancouver that were brought to Canada at the end of December, and they haven't been moved out into apartments or housing because they don't have anywhere to put them. Yeah. And I don't know how fair that is to anybody. I mean, the taxpayer is stuck with a very big cost, and then the family that's there that was promised, oh, you'll get this, you'll get that, you come to Canada, they're sitting in a hotel room, not overly happy.
Yeah, and first of all, Vancouver, perhaps the priciest place in the country. I mean, it's even more expensive in many ways than Toronto. Why would you send people to crowded, overpriced cities, and especially Vancouver, where they have a homeless problem to begin with? But here's what gets me, Brian, and this was boasted about by the Liberal Immigration Minister, John McCallum, in New Brunswick the other day. 90% of these migrants, according to McCallum, they don't speak English or French. So what are they going to do? So they're sitting there in an apartment or in a hotel in Vancouver, which is an English or, frankly, Chinese-speaking city. What are you going to do? How are you going to integrate? How are you going to get a job? How are you going to stay out of trouble? This is so rushed. It's just buying us, put aside questions of radicalism. It's just buying us poverty and failure.
And for everyone, involved. So you're bringing over people. I'll say this, speaking with the officials in the department on background today, and this is how they keep doing these briefings. We can speak to McCallum, and McCallum will come out and say, oh, isn't this great? 90% don't speak English or French, so they can integrate wherever. He's saying that to make it sound good to Francophone regions of the country that, quite frankly, have trouble attracting immigrants, such as New Brunswick and Quebec, and that want to have some type of immigrant or refugee base to make their population younger, to sustain them going forward. That's why he's making that comment. But the officials in charge of bringing these people over, they admit it's a problem. And we thought that we were going to have more people coming forward that could speak English or French. They're not getting those people. That was one thing that they said. That results in them having to hire more translators, the immigrant services agencies that are assisting them in trying to integrate into the community, they have to find more translators, paid or volunteer. And while, yes, absolutely, there's a lot of Canadians coming forward and donating things, be it money, time, equipment needed, there's only so many that are going to be able to show up and translate on a regular basis. So you're right. These families are going to have a harder time integrating into the community. They're going to have a harder time finding a job. This is going to be a huge cost. And again, it goes back to you're rushing it. You're rushing it, and that's driving up the cost. Perhaps if we were doing this at a more modest pace, at a more sustainable pace, you might be able to find people that would have the qualifications that you're looking for so that they can integrate into the community, so that they can be ready for success instead of being ready to be shut out.
Yeah. Well, what's going to happen is what's happened in Germany when they brought in 1.1 million Muslim migrants last year, unvetted, overwhelmingly male, no language skills. They go to ghettos, obviously. They speak Arabic, or in Germany's case, a lot of Turkish or Persian. So they hang out amongst each other, and they develop these ghettos of high unemployment and, frankly, radicalization. And when it comes to other issues like Canadian values about tolerance of women, tolerance of minorities and gays, that just doesn't exist. We are seeing the early days of the kind of migrant problems they have in Germany. I'm not saying we're there yet, but I think we'll get there. Let me throw one last thing at you, Brian. I see today that the first plane has come in from Ankara, Turkey. So we had been taking planes from Jordan before, and I understand perhaps from Lebanon. So who chose the people in Turkey? Well, according to a Canadian Press report I saw today, the Turkish government was choosing who we were taking. Well, the Turkish government is an Islamist government run by a bully named Recep Erdogan, and he's no friend of ours. He's not going to choose moderate Kurds to come here. He hates Kurds. He's not going to choose Christian Arabs or Armenian Christians. He hates them. I mean, why are we allowing an Islamist, I'm not going to call him an enemy because Turkey's actually a NATO ally, but that raises the other point. If they're coming from Turkey, they're no longer in any danger. So what we're doing by taking a plane from Ankara, Turkey, not taking people in real danger, taking people chosen by the bully authoritarian semi-dictator of Turkey, and we're just filling quotas, but with people who don't speak English or French. None of this makes any sense to me, Brian. Does it make any sense to you?
No, not at all. And let me just spell out that this is why we need to have our own security vetting, our own health vetting, our vetting at every level done by Canadians, whether we're talking about the people coming from Turkey or from Jordan or from Lebanon. The fact is that Turkey doesn't work with the United Nations and the UN High Commissioner on Refugees. That's why they are doing the initial screening for us. If we don't have secondary screening, proper Canadian secondary screening after that, then we could be in trouble. We have been trying to find out what our screening system is. I've seen some generic application forms not really going to tell you a whole lot of information other than the person's name and their address. Well, refugee camp. Okay, great. So there's a lot of problems with that. But even with the ones coming from Lebanon and from Jordan, the United Nations does the initial vetting there. As I reported several weeks back, the UN's handbook for processing refugees says on page 120, section G26, that being on a designated terrorist list or member of a terrorist group does not preclude you from being a refugee. Why? The United Nations can't agree on what terrorism is. And so they live by the one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter mantra. You're having locals hired by the UN with this guidebook deciding, okay, let's screen that person. Yeah, you're good. You're a bona fide refugee to the UN. Go see Canada. If we don't do our own vetting after that, we could be in for a heap of trouble. The officials keep telling us they're doing the vetting, but when questioned on it, when pushed on it, they never have details.
Yeah, you know, just today we got another access to information request sent back from the Immigration Department saying, we're going to take a 300-day extension to answer your question. They're hiding something, Brian. Look, you've been generous with your time. I look forward to more of your reports from Ottawa. I'm going to invite our folks to visit one of my favorite websites, which is refugeepause.ca, Pause.ca. Listen, don't take it from me and Brian. Take it from the pro-refugee social services man you saw there saying, you just got to stop bringing the migrants in by the thousand. Just pause. Refugeepause.ca. Brian, great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, stay with us. More after these words.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta. Go to thedestroyers.ca to sign up for your free copy today.
Welcome back. My favorite part of the show, your viewer mail. Patricia writes about Rachel Notley's NDP forcing Alberta schools to let boys into girls' change rooms. She says, I'm fully supportive of transgendered rights, but not at the expense of anyone else's rights. They need to set aside a separate bathroom for transgendered. Well, look, that's the thing. These proposals are not actually about protecting gay kids from being bullied. First of all, there are already strict anti-bullying rules in schools. And Alberta itself has an extremely liberal transgender rights law. These proposals are about destroying the entire social idea of gender itself. You don't order every school to stop using the words mother and father. That's actually in these proposed rules. If you're stopping bullying about gay kids, it's not related. What's that got to do with stopping bullying of gay kids? That's about some wacko NDP theorist getting back at some Catholic school nun they had 30 years ago. That's what that is. It's daddy issues. That's mommy issues. That's all sorts of psychotherapy by screwed up NDP activists being rained down on the heads of school kids. You don't stop the bullying of gay kids in school by bullying everyone else, including the bizarre and dangerous rule that any boy or man, including 18-year-old kids in grade 12, or even adult parents, can go into the girls' change rooms and bathrooms. That's just nuts. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating with these examples, you've got to go see the rules for yourself at protectourgirls.ca. You'll see the document. James writes in about our new ebook about Rachel Notley's NDP. I'm definitely against the NDP, but something you said about the book bothers me. Hugo Chavez was a man who championed the cause of the poor. What I know of him is that he was very important for his work on behalf of Mexican farm workers who had no representation. We must care for the poor, something the Conservative Party didn't do well at. Why can't we care for the poor and have conservative values at the same time? Hi, James. You got to download Sheila's book, and you'll see that you're actually confusing Cesar Chavez, the activist for Mexican farm workers' rights in the United States in the 60s and 70s, with Hugo Chavez, the authoritarian strongman from Venezuela who ruled that country with an iron fist until he died recently. So you're confusing the two. It was Hugo Chavez, that Latin American dictator, who was praised so fully by the Alberta NDP. Listen, do yourself a favor and read the book. It's free. Go to thedestroyers.ca and you can get the book for free. John writes in to author Sheila Gunn Reid about the Destroyers as well. As he wrote to Sheila, here's the book, his letter. He says, I received a copy of the book last night, and was disturbed by its contents. Many of the things you wrote were not known to me. Not surprising when mainstream media doesn't do their job correctly and inform the public. So thank you for this work. I have spoken to several people about the book already, and they will be looking to find a copy for themselves. Well, thanks, John. They can find a copy for themselves. They just go to thedestroyers.ca. Anyone can. It's a free ebook. But as to the substance of your point, look, the mainstream media, or as I usually call them, the media party, they've got an agenda. Now, most of them are liberal, but even the ones who aren't liberal, they don't like to rock the boat. They don't want to be marginalized by their peers. They don't want to be cut off from news scoops from the government. And they're always pressed for time on a deadline anyways. But even all those things don't excuse the lack of any basic due diligence about the Notley NDP. I understand no one paying attention to how kooky their candidates were before they rose in the polls, but in the final month of the campaign, especially the final 2 weeks before the election, last April, May, when it was clear that they had a real chance of winning, the media party was still in cheerleading mode, not actually journalism. And that groupthink continues largely to this day. That's why I say that we here at The Rebel are, quote, the other side of the story. Well, folks, that's the show for today. What do you think? What do you think about Facebook coming up with ideas like counter speech, where they delete speech they don't like and promote speech they do like? How do you think that's going to make your life? If you're not allowed to see what's really going on, and you have to hear what Big Brother tells you. I mean, in the book 1984 by George Orwell, it was Big Brother coming to you at your TV screen. Well, you know, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't look as demonic as Big Brother, but he's coming at you from your laptop, from your cell phone, from everywhere you go. I think that's very scary. Well, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it, folks. Hey, you, keep fighting for freedom.